Hi, I am Dr. Tamara Harville, and I am the Academic Lab Coordinator for the West Campus Writing Center and the Online Writing Lab, and I also teach Comp 1, Comp 2 Reading and Writing. And today I am here to give you a tutorial over critical reading and why it's important. Because if you are reading someone's work, especially to write about it, you really have to understand it. You have to read between the lines, and that's where critical reading comes into play. Now there's also something called active reading. When you read something, it always helps to keep something to write on and write with, or you can write on your book and take notes such as what I'm about to show you. So critical reading depends on the purpose of the author, their intended audience, their point of view, tone, and so many other things, and we're going to briefly cover those for you. Okay, so first is the purpose, and this is basically their reason for writing. Are they just writing for fun? That would be entertainment. Other than that, there's a real reason behind it. They are either informing or instructing you, the audience, to do something. They're trying to persuade you to think or feel a certain way or act upon something, or they're just trying to entertain you. So I'm going to talk about all three, and I've pulled excerpts from the book The Hunger Games as examples for all three of these. The first one is to inform. Makes sense. It's basically just giving information, stating facts, explaining something. It could also be instructing. History texts are really big with this. Basically any textbook. News articles, encyclopedias. This is where you go for information, and that's basically to inform. So here is an excerpt for you. In the Remake Center, the prep teams scrub the dirt and grime of the outer districts away, burnish the tribute's skin with exfoliating foam, untangle and brush out their hair, give them manicures and pedicures, and remove body hair with warm wax when necessary. In the end, the tributes emerge sparkling clean, with smooth, glowing skin, ready for the stylists to work their magic. Okay, so yes, this is entertaining, but it's also informing us of the steps that the tributes have to go through. Next is to entertain, which we probably have all been familiar with. This is telling a funny story, describing a pleasant event, some drama, some fun. You can find these in fictional stories, poems, short stories, graphic novels, movies, anything like that. And here's an entertaining piece. Ladies first, she says. She reaches her pale, elegant arm deep into the large glass ball and rummages around. This action is performed 24 times over the course of the day, and each time there's total silence across Panem. Who will it be this year? The nation holds its breath. Effie removes her hand. So, we want to hear more. That's what makes it entertaining. The next one is persuasive, and to persuade someone, the writer is informing the audience of something, but they're also trying to get the audience to either believe a certain way or to act upon it. You can find these in argumentative essays, situational piece maybe in the news to inspire action, a speech for action. This could be at a demonstration or protest, hopefully a peaceful protest. Nonfiction stories, anything that is persuasive is trying to get someone to do or act or think a specific way. Here's the excerpt. To survive in the games, one needs skills. If you're in the arena, you want to be able to catch your own food. You could gather it, shoot it, fish for it, or catch it with a snare. Katniss Everdeen seems quite at home in this situation, in this station. It's hard to see through the tall grass, but it looks like she's figured out an intricate rope snare. Okay, so yes, this is also entertaining, but the word needs. One needs skills. If you don't have skills to eat, you won't survive. So that's what makes this persuasive, is you need to know this information, right? Okay, so the purpose: inform, instruct, entertain, persuade. What is the purpose behind the author's writing? In addition to purpose, you have the audience, and this is to whom the author is writing. Why is the audience important? Well, let's talk about it. Usually an author doesn't just write to write. They have a specific audience in mind. For example, scientists will write procedural papers to other scientists. Newspapers write to a general audience. Novelists have a specific genre in mind. So it could be like a historical romance, sci-fi, an action. So there's always a specific audience. The reason this is important, because it helps you decide what the author's purpose is, since the audience does play a huge factor into why they're writing. So if you read a scientific paper and it made perfect sense and it described a lot of stuff, it's probably there to instruct pretty much anybody or inform pretty much anybody, right? But if the language changes to a scientific tone, because it's geared to other scientists, they expect those scientists to understand specific procedures or names and titles of specific things. So they're not going to explain it all. So if you're reading it, it may seem like it's way over your head and too difficult, but you weren't the intended audience. So that's why it's important to understand the audience. There is a specific vocabulary and tone involved. When you're reading someone's work, if you don't understand something, look it up. Vocabulary is very important, because if you don't understand word for word exactly what they're saying, you may miss something. And tone's important because the tone lets you know whether or not it's serious or to be taken lightly. So assume that a specific audience has already been chosen when the author writes, so that they don't have to explain everything. And then try to figure out who that specific audience is that influenced the author. Point of view is next, and this isn't first, second, third person point of view. This is the point of view from the writing. What is the author's opinion, or what point are they writing it from? And I like this little clip at the top where a man's been stranded on the island and he sees a boat and he says, "Boat!" And then there's another guy who's been floating around in a boat and he finally sees land and he's like, "Land!" That's why point of view is important, because depending on the point of view, the whole reading could actually be totally different. So, if it's only reporting the facts, such as the incident in the news, the author may not even have an opinion about it. Sometimes they do, and it just kind of slips in. But their opinion can also be the reason behind it. It could be subtle, revealed through specific words, and it's really difficult sometimes to understand their point of view. If they go too far, it can be bias. Bias is their prejudice on the issue, where they stand on it. So here's a couple of examples here. A non-biased opinion. An author writes about abortion, simply states the procedures that exist. That's non-biased, it's reporting information. Getting biased is then if the author then includes how the embryo was a life and that abortion should be abolished. Now you've got the author's perspective. You know where they're coming from, you know what they're thinking, and that's why it's important. Tone is difficult because you're not hearing it. So if I'm talking like I am now, you get my tone. You can tell that I'm being pleasant and I'm being informative, that I'm not being serious and mean, right? But how do you get that from writing? Here's an example at the top, and it says that tone indicates the writer's mood, voice, and attitude. Its tone is usually described by adjectives: cynical, depressed, outraged, sarcastic, intense. But how do you know the tone? Well, one way to do it is just to imagine that the author's reading aloud to you and try to hear it from their voice. Just like a speaker, there is a tone in the writing, and it's usually determined through the chosen words. So let's look at the words, "Wow, it's snowing." You read this on a piece of paper and you're not sure how to take it. There's several tones. 3, for example, I could say, "Wow, it's snowing." That could be an excited little kid, right? Or, "Wow, it's snowing." That could be maybe from someone who's never seen snow, or they're living in an area that it rarely ever snows. What about, "Wow, it's snowing"? That's someone who's not even excited, even though the words look exciting. So how are you supposed to read this? This is why tone is so super important, and it's also super difficult. Here is a handful of tones, some on the left, some in the little picture here. These aren't even all of them. There are so many tones that can be out there, and it's important to you to try to figure out, based on the words being used, the vocabulary, what tone is being expressed. But be careful. Sometimes if you read too literally, you may not understand these items, sarcasm and irony. Sarcasm is a remark that can be contemptuous or ridicule to someone. It's meant to be hurtful. Sometimes the reader takes things literally and can't see the sarcasm, but it's basically that writer poking at the readers. And sometimes it's trying to get them to really pay attention. And I like this picture here. It says, "I wish sarcasm was available as a font." I really do. Irony, on the other hand, is when words mean the opposite. So for example, if it's raining outside and you forget your umbrella and you say, "Great!" It's not great. You forgot your umbrella. That's irony. And a whole situation can be ironic, especially Alanis Morissette sings the song Ironic with a bunch of situations. A lot of them are just bad luck. Irony, though, is when it's the opposite of what it should do. And the one I picked for this example was where the man was afraid to fly. He packed a suitcase, kisses his kids goodbye, waited his whole damn life to take the flight, and as the plane crashed down, he thought, well, isn't this nice? That's irony, because it's not nice, right? Next is intended meaning. What is the author meaning behind the work? Think of someone's writing as an iceberg. So when you see an iceberg, there's only like 10% at the top, 90% underneath the water. That's the meaning behind that 10%, and you've got to figure it out. So how do you do it? That's difficult. That's why you have to take all of these items into effect. So the intended meaning is basically what the author wants you to understand, even though they may not say it. So example, the author may write that scientists are so busy trying to study global warming, yet we had the coldest winter we've had in years. Why are they bothering? So what's the meaning behind this? Well, the author could be meaning, maybe we don't know enough about global warming. Why is it even called that if we're having cold winters? Or maybe they're trying to get these scientists to explain how global warming affects winters as well. Because winters aren't getting warmer, they're getting worse, right? So there could be different meanings. It just depends on the context around it and how the rest of it's written. So critical reading is basically reading between the lines or trying to find out that 90% of the iceberg that's underneath the water. What is the purpose of the author, their intended audience, their point of view? Are they biased? Did they use irony or sarcasm? What is their tone and their intended meaning? So you have to take all of these items into account. So when you read someone's work, don't just read it and then try to write about it. Try to figure out what all of these items are. And that would help you to understand their writing better. And I really hope this information helps you. Thank you.